Hey, this is Lukasz from the future, and just quick few words about the video you're watching. I've recorded it probably, I would say maybe March 2025 or April, so it was a little while back. And since then my process is not only to shoot on site, but also the post-production in Capture One, Lightroom and Photoshop changed a bit. And I think every photographer goes through that. My process right now is a little bit different to what's shown in this video. Secondly, I've tried not to cut too much of my editing process, so the only time really you'll see me making cuts is maybe where I made some form of a mistake, or if I'm drawing some masks, I'll speed it up. Apart from that, everything is pretty much full real-time editing, and as you might expect, it's going to take a little bit longer because I'm trying to explain what I'm doing as I'm doing it. Other thing worth noting is that I'm not using any actions here, and that was on purpose, just to show you how I go through everything manually step by step. I actually plan on making a video about custom actions that I'm using, and I'll also make them freely available to everyone who wants to download them and try them out. So that's gonna come out soon. Keep your eyes out on that and make sure you subscribe. All the raw files and my final images will be available to download totally for free. So if you want to try and edit them yourself, go ahead and feel free to send me your results so I can have a look myself. Now with that out of the way, let's continue with the video. Hey, what is up everyone? This is Lukasz. Today I'm back again on site. I'm gonna be shooting a property for real estate agent. It's a small 2-bedroom apartment. What I'm planning to do is basically a flambient shoot, mainly get my ambient. In some situations I might get 2, depending on how bright the scene is. 1 exposure for the outside if we have windows visible, 1 exposure for the lights. So I'm gonna shoot without the lights. I usually prefer the general look of property without the lights, so when I edit I can make it either natural look without lights, or I can add the lights later on. Typically, if I am under time restrictions, I would go in, put all the lights on, shoot basically 1 ambient layer, and then get my flash layers. I'm going to try and keep it minimum in terms of flash pops. Typically what I'll try and do is get 1 from behind the camera, and then 1 on the right side of the room and 1 on the left side of the room. I'm going to be shooting more for real estate agent, so it means I'm going to blast everything with light. I'm not really after supernatural look, although, you know, the ambient will create that, or the luminance of the ambient layer will create that a little bit. But general purpose here for me now will be just blast it with light, make it bright. That's exactly what the estate agents love. So I'm not going to bother too much about creating any drama in the photos. In terms of the equipment I'll be using, Sony a7 III with 12 to 24 millimeter lens from Sony. For small properties, typically like these ones, and for real estate agents, that 12 millimeter, they love it. X3 trigger from Godox, this is the Sony version. Cam Ranger 2, as I mentioned. Gearhead from KNF Concept, GD3W. In terms of lighting, because we're in a small property, I'm going to be using again Godox AD200 Pro, just 1. I carry with me typically 1 right now. I used to carry 2, but I replaced the second one with AD600 BM, which I use occasionally for bigger properties and if I need more power. Okay, so we've got our first angle. What I'm going to do is start first with getting my window exposure, then I'll put the lights on. I'll grab 2 frames probably for the lights, and then we're gonna grab my AD200 and we'll light up the scene. So I'm just gonna pop in behind the camera first. Hopefully you can see my Cam Ranger here. Let's drop the exposure. Okay, so we've got a little bit overexposure on the windows, so I'm pretty sure we'll be able to recover that. So I'm going to take this one. And I've just put the lights on, so we're gonna again take an exposure. Okay, that's where they start overexposing. So I'll take 1 for here, and let's bump up the exposure and see if the lights are casting anything on the wall. So they do a little bit. I'm going to grab maybe 1/10 of a second. Okay, so we don't need the lights anymore. And let's grab exposure that we'll be using for our flash. So 1/6, I think 1/6 look pretty decent. So I'm just gonna do 1/6. I'm going to drop my exposure now down to 1/80th of a second. Now I've got my AD200 Pro. I've set it at 1/8th of a power. I'm just gonna basically place it above the camera and let's see what we get. Okay, that's not too bad. I think we need to increase the power a little bit. I could leave it like that and do it in Lightroom later on, but since I'm not time restricted and this is for tutorial purposes, I will actually increase it by 0.6 of a power. And let's pop it again. Okay, that looks pretty decent. And now I'm going to get one shot where I can bounce the light on the left side of the room and then on the right side of the room. We have to be aware of the fans on the ceiling. Funnily enough, you don't really see them in UK very much. So we don't deal with them as often as you do in the United States. We might need to get one flash here and one behind, depending what type of shadows they'll be casting. In any case, we can also edit this stuff out either with luminosity blending. It might actually become, very negligible. And if there's still a problem, we can always remove it using the healing brush or something like that. AD200 Pro is still at 1/8 plus 0.6 of a power. I'm basically checking everything on the iPad. I think we have pretty long shadow coming off of that fan. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go behind and cast the light from here. And this way we should get a clean ceiling here. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's better, but it's a bit bright. I think we can adjust it in post. I'm not going to take another shot. So basically I'm going to replicate everything on the other side. So let's do here. And one here. Okay, welcome back to my home office. I've uploaded all the photographs onto my computer and I've fired up Lightroom. Typically, I would actually edit my raw images in Capture One for most of the work I do, but on this occasion, I'll be doing it in Lightroom. I think most photographers use Lightroom. For the sake of saving a little bit of time on this tutorial, because I think it's going to be pretty long, I have pre-selected and made adjustments to photographs I'll be using in the blending. I'll go through the process on one of the shots just to give you an idea what I would do. In Capture One, I actually use presets. I have presets for every type of frame I use within my shot. For example, I would have one for window frames. I would have one for ambient shots, one for flash, and so on. Lights on for luminosity, and all that. I have a couple of those presets in Lightroom as well, and I would definitely encourage you to make your own because that's going to save you a lot of time. For your typical run-of-the-mill photo shoots for real estate agents, one general preset will probably do. I always start from changing profile from Adobe Color, which is default one in Lightroom, to Adobe Standard. And that's because it's a little bit less saturated, and that's my preference. Of course, you can do whatever you want. I would skip white balance for the time being. We're creating a preset or adjustments that we'll be able to copy to all other photographs. So we don't really want to make adjustments to the white balance. We'll do that later on, and probably only to flash shots and our window frames, really. I like having my window frames be balanced correctly. So a little bit warmer on the outside and then correctly, separately balancing the interior. In terms of exposure, that's really depending on the shot. For example, this one is window view. So I've increased the exposure a little bit. I've added a little bit of contrast. I always typically would drop highlights to get a little bit of data in the overexposed areas or the clipped areas. Bring in the shadows or lift the shadows, add a little bit of whites that will increase our contrast a little bit, and then drop blacks again that will just make everything a little bit more contrasty. Next we have clarity. I typically add a little bit of it. It increases contrast in midtones, and I would normally set it somewhere between 5 and 10, I would say typically. I don't really mess with curves. I always leave the color and color grading out. Next changes I would do is to sharpening. I would typically increase it to 60. Default is 40. And I would normally press Alt and adjust the slider so I can see which areas are getting sharpened. So anything in white will be sharpened, anything in black will be left alone. Again, typically I would leave it somewhere between 60 and 80. And if we scroll down here, I leave noise as it is and make sure we have our lens correction. So I always add remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. And yeah, this is about it. If you're planning to do manual adjustments instead of using preset for a job like that, I would typically advise you to find probably an ambient frame, one that's going to be somewhere in the middle of the histogram. You see, this one is exposed a little bit to the right, but it's somewhere in the middle of the histogram, and make all the adjustments there. And then once you've done everything and the photo is selected, you can press Ctrl A, that's going to select everything on the film strip, and then you can sync it. Now, I'm not going to sync it because it would destroy all the adjustments I made to the separate images, but you would just press synchronize. You can leave the white balance on. If you've made any changes to the white balance, make sure you turn it off, otherwise your photographs will go really crazy. As I said, then I go through each shot and make adjustments. So for example, here I have my window frame. So I've increased the temperature outside a little bit. I want it to be warmer. If I would balance it exactly the same as, let's say, my flash frame, which is at 5400, the outside view, it would be leaning towards blue color. So I personally prefer to balance it separately. So I make separate adjustments for that, and I only concentrate on the view. Next, we have our lights. For this, pretty much I didn't do many adjustments at all. I think, as you can see, as I was saying, highlights are -50, shadows at +35, whites +30, blacks -10. I think I went up with whites just before the lights start clipping here or become overexposed. So that's what I was concentrating on. Next, we have our ambient frame. I am not bothered about white balance. Typically, as you can see, it was the automatic white balance from the camera at 5500 Kelvin, and it looks pretty decent. But again, for ambient, we don't really need to worry about white balance. We're only going to be using luminosity from this layer. For the flash frame, I start adjustments on my base one, which is typically the one where I've shot the AD200 above and behind the camera, and that typically lights up the whole scene. And normally, really, that includes changing the white balance. Sometimes I'll need to adjust exposure, highlights, shadows, and so on, but that's about it. And then I'll copy the settings to the other fill flash frames. So we have one shot here, which lights up the right-hand side of the image, and the other one, which lights up the left-hand side of the image. Sometimes you might find that you need to change the white balance. As you can see, I've put this one at 5700 and the other one is at 5500. You don't need to worry about it too much as long as you get it somewhere in the ballpark. Later on, when we blend the images, we'll probably use hue saturation to desaturate our walls and ceilings a little bit. So you don't have to be 100% correct. Of course, it's best if you get as close as possible to the correct white balance, but sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. Okay, so with that said, let's grab our frame and let's start working on our first photograph. Okay, so I've opened all the frames as layers in Photoshop. I've also renamed them just so it's a little bit easier for this first example here. And I've also actually added a blue sky from the sky solution kit. I'm going to replace the sky in the image here. First, let's start with getting our flash frames sorted. So what we want to do is get our base flash frame and put it on the bottom of the layer stack. This is the frame we're going to be building up on. So let's remove the visibility of all the other layers. And looking at the image here, it looks pretty okay exposed. Just the areas in the back are a little bit darker. So let's put the visibility on our fill flash. And look here, I'm going to drop the opacity here a little bit. We don't even have to be at 100%. So let's add a mask. If you press Alt and click on the mask icon here, that's going to hide it. Going to press D to reset our colors. I'm just going to paint with white. I don't want to paint myself in here. Let's see if I increase the opacity a little bit. And then let's get the other side. Again, let's create a mask. Just brighten up a little bit this area here. And to be honest, like, we almost really don't need it. From what I can see, it really doesn't do that much. I mean, we've eliminated the shadow that was there, but that's about it. You can always put those frames in lighten mode. That's just going to let through the brighter pixels. I'm just going to leave it on normal in this case anyway. And yeah, so this is about our flash frame. I'm going to actually select everything, press Ctrl G to put it in the group, and let's call that group Flash. And now we can make some adjustments to our hue and saturation. So I'm going to press Ctrl U. I've made a specific shortcut for this. Let's call it walls/ceiling. And we're going to desaturate the walls and the ceiling a little bit. I've got another shortcut here I've created, Ctrl-Shift-R, which opens up my color range. If you've not created your own shortcut for that, you can go to the Select menu and go down to Color Range. And I'm going to select anything that's supposed to be white in the image. So we have quite a few bits here. Almost like 80% is white here. Okay, we don't have to make super crazy selection. I'm going to press OK, and that will automatically add that selection as a mask to our hue saturation. And from here we can start desaturating. Now we can start desaturating anything. So on the master here, that's going to desaturate all the colors. But we can also select specific colors that we want to desaturate. So if you look at yellows, we have quite a bit of yellows here. So we can go down on those. Maybe, I wouldn't really go below -50, to be honest. And this way we're preserving colors, the green, for example. But I know with my lens, I do get a lot of greens in the corners, but okay, we have quite a bit of greens, so I'm going to drop that maybe 40. Let's look at cyan. That's typically quite a bit on my lens. Let's drop it around 40. Magentas typically go all the way down normally. Not many of them. Let's look at the blues. Yeah, we'll go down around 45, more or less. And let's look at reds. There's a little bit, so let's go down -40. Now, obviously, we desaturated our flooring a little bit and the carpet and so on. Let's put it into a group. I'm going to call it again walls/ceiling. And I've got a shortcut actually for my mask. So if I press Ctrl F, it's going to create automatically a black mask. Actually, I'm going to invert it. So now everything is desaturated, and it's going to be easier for me to select with my polygonal lasso tool anything else that I don't want to be desaturated. So even though the cabinet here looks pretty decent, I'm just going to make a very rough selection. It doesn't have to be crazy. Our desaturation is not 100% anyway, so you won't really see much of a difference. Double click to close it. And let's go with our flooring as well. So I'm just going to make a very rough selection, nothing major. Now, if I would be doing job for interior design, I would definitely do and spend more time on getting things like this done correctly. But for typical real estate photo shoot, that's going to be more than enough. And let's do the flooring here as well. So I'm pressing Shift and adding to our selection. So basically right now I'm selecting the areas that I don't want to be desaturated. Currently right now everything is, because we have a white mask on top of it. So just around here. And we're pretty much done. We also have those curtain poles, but as you can see, they look pretty decent. They haven't been desaturated much. That's why I like the color range tool. Okay, now that we have our selection, we can press Control Backspace, and that's going to fill it with our background color, in this case, black. And as you can see, we've got our colors back. Then what we can do is create a new layer. I'm going to call it Color. Change the blending mode to color, and this way we're just going to be painting color. And I'm going to press Alt and select the floor color here. I'm going to just paint over these a little bit. We have kind of a blue glare. And we can drop opacity a little bit, maybe somewhere around 60% or so. Okay, so I'm going to put everything in the group, just call it Flash. Then we have our ambient. Let's change blending mode to luminosity, and that looks crazy. Always, whenever you use luminosity mode on anything that's orange, it really saturates the color heavily. And normally what you can do is drop opacity. Basically, around 50% is where typically it looks decent. The other option is you can keep it at 100%, put a black mask, and then we can just paint where we want to add our luminosity and leave out areas that we don't want to add, or just add a little bit. It's really up to you. So I can add a little bit to the floor. Then we can add curves adjustment layer. I've got a shortcut I've created, Control M, and that adds it as adjustment layer. By default, it's under image adjustments and curves, but this doesn't make a separate adjustment layer. It just applies it to whatever layer you're working on. I prefer to use adjustment layers, so I've changed the default keyboard shortcut to the one that creates adjustment layer. And now I'm going to clip it to our ambient layer, and I can either do that by pressing this button here in the properties panel for our curves adjustment, or I can press and hold Alt, go in between curves layer and our ambient layer and just click, and it's going to clip it, which means that particular adjustment layer will only adjust the layer below. So we'll only be adjusting ambient layer. Anything below that, like flash or the blue sky, will not be affected. All right, so let's drop our shadows here a little bit and increase white. So we're just going to add more or less an S-curve. That's going to give us a little bit of contrast. And if you want, you can change it to luminosity. That's going to make sure that we don't add any saturation. Okay, so that looks decent. Then we have our lights. For that, we can change it to normally lighten mode. So typically, when the image is too dark, you get this weird colors. For that, you can either adjust. So if we add curves, clip it, and we increase the brightness, as you can see, it removes it. That's one option of working on that. The other option is if we'll change it from lighten to screen. that also adds those lights, even a little bit brighter. So I think I'm going to leave it at lighten mode and make those adjustments to the curves. So that's that. And then we have our windows. So I'm just going to use polygonal lasso tool for the windows. Let's add a black mask and just let's trace this quickly around the windows here. If you want, you can do window pulls. As I've mentioned before, I don't really like doing too many window pulls, especially for windows like that, where it's quite easy to make those adjustments. As you can see, we're going quite fast. You know, this one has a curtain around here, so that adds a little bit of complexity to the whole thing, but it's nothing too difficult. And I've got my feathering set at 0.4, which I find somewhere between 0.4 to 1 is typically quite good. And let's fill that with our white. Let's do Alt and backspace. That's going to fill it with our foreground color. So we have our windows here. Next, we can look at any fixes we need to make. So for that, I'm going to make a new layer. I'll call it Fixes. I'm going to press J and select our healing brush. And I'm going to look at the photograph and see what I want to remove. So those little hangers are not needed here. You've got some damage here. I'm just going to clear up those little things. And it really depends on your agent, what you want to fix yourself. Some of the stuff you can, some of it you probably don't want to. I'm going to use remove tool on this one. Just to fix the paint. Let's get our clone stamp tool. I'm just going to gently paint that area here. Again, I'm going a little bit overboard, to be honest, because we don't really need to do those changes. I think there's some sensor dust here. We'll have to check on the other photos and see if it's in the same spot. But for the sake of tutorial, I'm just removing those little distractions here and there. Okay, I think that'll do. So now let's put everything in the group apart from our blue sky. And what I'm going to do is get our lasso tool. And I'm just going to select the sky area around here. You don't have to be super accurate, but for some of the things you might need to be a little bit more precise, just to avoid any trouble. So like here we have those blue, white-ish gray windows, and they're going to be similar color as the sky right now. So I'm trying to remove them from my selection so that it doesn't get affected. This is me just going overboard a little bit here. Again, for your typical real estate photo shoots, you probably wouldn't really go to that extent. The building here is kind of cream color, which might be affected if I do my selection with the color range tool. So I'm just avoiding it a little bit. Okay, so we've got our sky selected. I'm going to go to select, color range. And now we're just wanting to select the sky areas here. All right. And then let's create a mask. All right, so that gives us the sky. Let's press Ctrl T. Going to scale it down. And let's see, we're looking maybe for a brighter area of that sky here. Yeah, I think I prefer it maybe around here. We can add curves adjustment, brighten these up a little bit. And what we can do for windows as well, if we feel like they're a little bit dark, we can brighten them. So it looks a little bit more real. And that means I think we'll need to get the sky a little bit brighter as well. Okay, I think that will do for our basic blend. We can add a little bit of contrast and so on. I'm just going to save that, and later on in Lightroom I can make some final adjustments and add the contrast there. I typically would use maybe Nik color effects or luminosity masking and add a little bit of contrast in mid-tones, a little bit in the shadows and so on. Okay, so this is our second shot. I'm going to hide behind the corner there and start taking our shots. So as with the previous one, I'm just going to start with the window view, and I might need to take two. This is a pretty bright scene, but then there's the window on the left, which is not as bright. So let's see, one is 1/60th, and I think I'll put the other one at 1/50th, I think looks decent. Then I'm going to put the lights on in the hallway and also here. So we put the kitchen and the living room. And let's again take probably 2 layers. One is going to be just to paste in the brightest lights. I'm going to probably do, I guess, 1/60th. And then one for the luminance of those lights. Let's see, 1/13th how it is. Yeah, I think that's decent, maybe 1/10th. Okay, perfect. So we've got our light layer, our window frames. Now I'm going to take 2 frames of our ambient for the luminosity blending later on with the flash. So, okay, this one looks pretty decent. I might go even 1/8. That's still to the right of the histogram. That's pretty decent. And I'm going to drop, I think we might drop it to 1/100th. So there's a bit of view out there visible. Okay, so I'll start actually right here in the hallway, and I'm going to use my flash to try and light up this area. The flash is still at 8 and 0.6. It might be a bit high. No, I think it's actually it's perfect. I don't even think we need to take another shot. Let's try and do the kitchen. I'm going to leave it the same, but again, might be a little bit high. So we have to be a little bit careful. There's a small space, so I don't want to create too many hot spots. Okay, that's fairly decent, but the back of the kitchen is not really lit up. Okay, that's a little bit better. And then I'm going to do one on the other side. Okay, I think we'll have to live with that. I'll just leave it as it is. Let's take one on this side and one on the other. Again, we have to be fairly careful because of the fans on the ceiling. Okay, it looks pretty decent. I'm pointing the flash at an angle. Actually, both walls and the ceiling is white, so that means I can bounce it at an angle. If the walls would be a different color, then I would only bounce off of the ceiling itself, just to avoid any additional color casts. Okay, this is a little bit low, so I'm going to increase maybe to 1/4 of a power. Let's see if that's going to be better. That looks a little bit better. And then I have to try and do one from behind here. So I might be just in the shot. I'm going to try and angle it as well at the corner. Yeah, that's pretty bright, but I'm sure that's going to work. Okay, I've opened up our second photo, and on this one I'm not going to bother with changing the names and so on. I typically know what each frame is supposed to do, so I'm just gonna try and walk you through what I'll be doing. So let's have a look at the frames here. We need to find our base, which is just around here. So I'm just gonna go up the stack, add masks, and I'm just going to add a little bit of fill flash in the areas that need it. So this one already looks decent. Add a little bit here. I'm gonna leave maybe a little bit of that shadow. Okay, that area near the kitchen. You can turn it on and off to see how it changes. And then we have the kitchen itself. Let's see, maybe we use lighten mode on this one, I think. Doesn't have to be crazy bright, just a little bit of it. And look, let's look at the other frame here. Okay, that looks decent. Actually, I think it's even a little bit bright. I'm just going to group the kitchen together and drop the opacity a little bit. To add everything into a group, let's create hue saturation, add color range. I'm actually removing localized color clusters just so I can select it all faster here. Let's see what else we need to. Okay, I think most of the stuff is here. Okay. Just press OK. I'm going to drop saturation maybe by 50 or so. Let's group that. I'm going to add a black mask on top, and now I'm going to paint in some of that desaturated areas here. I actually forgot we've got another frame for the flash. Which is this one here. So let's change this to a lighten blending mode. So let's see if I turn it on and off. Okay, really the only brightened area is around here and the hallway. So what I'm going to do is I'll drop opacity roughly to the amount that looks okay for me in terms of the exposure. And I'll add a mask, and then I'll change the color to black, and I'll just make sure that we remove that little part here. Although, to be honest, we're going to paste in our window view, so that will probably not be really visible. And I'm going to move our hue saturation on top and see if we paint around here, we can remove a little bit of that yellowish color. Okay, so that's our flash frame. Let's just group everything. And then we have our ambient. So I don't even think we need to use the bright one. I'm just going to leave it for the time being. Let's change the mode to luminosity. And I'm going to gently paint it over. I usually like to paint it over the window areas. The window themselves will look a bit weird, but the light around windows is, I think it's quite important to sell the realistic view. Just removing some of that ambient from there because it doesn't work best with it. Let's add here, curves adjustment layer. I'm going to add a little bit of an S-curve, so we're going to brighten it up. Again, I'm overdoing it a little bit. It's something for an estate agent, so they'll want very bright, everything lit up photographs. I'm going to remove that layer. We don't really need it. Okay, so this is supposed to be our luminosity light layer. So let's see. I think that works pretty good. Let's zoom in the kitchen. I'm just going to paint into under cabinet lights, just to give it a little bit of that feeling of those lights being on. There's some discoloration here, so I think we're going to create a color layer. I'm just going to rename it just to make it a little bit easier. Let's make sure we have the white color selected, and I'll gently paint that over. There was something there. I don't know if it was from the lighten layer. I don't think we used the lighten layer, but in any case, we removed that. So that looks decent. Next, we have our lights layer. Before we do that, do we want to add some luminosity in the hallway here? No, I'm going to leave it. Let's change our lights layer. So that's under lighten mode. I'm just painting in what I want to add. It looks decent, but we might add, I think let's add curves. Let's clip it. Okay, just making it a little bit brighter there. Okay, that looks decent. So next thing are the windows. Let's use our polygonal lasso tool. Again, I'm gonna work fairly fast on this one. Fortunately, in this shot, the curtains are out of the way pretty much. I think there's only one shot or one area here that we need to go around a little bit, but it's nothing major. Even with the polygonal lasso tool, we can make it work. Again, especially for real estate. Okay, so let's press Alt and Shift. Oh, we need to enable our layer. We need to add a mask, sorry. Okay. So that mask is added. We can copy it by pressing and holding Alt and copying it onto the other one. So that's the darker one. I'm going to put the brighter one actually on top. Let's put it inside a group. Let's put a black mask on top. And then if we want, we can get a white brush, maybe put flow at around 10%, and we can just paint over a little bit those ones here. So this one a little bit brighter and just a little bit here. Actually, the exposure looks pretty okay. And I think we might add a little bit exposure onto this one just to make it a little bit more believable. It's still fairly dark, but you know, you can see the view outside and the nice sky. I'll probably add the lighter layer onto this one. So I've just made a selection and I'm just going to paint it with white. That's that brighter layer. And here we go. So that's our blend done. Again, normally I would add a little bit here. There's some stuff maybe we want to remove. So we can add a new layer, call it fixes. Let's press J. I'm just going to do some cleanup here. So I'm just using healing brush, selecting from clean areas and sampling into the areas that need fixing. I mean, there's some stuff on the walls. Again, you don't really need to spend time on that. There's some things that might be obvious that you want to remove. Most of the stuff you can probably leave. You know, the agent might ask you to remove little bits here and there. Just need to make sure I align it correctly. You know, those little things, no one's really going to see them. And especially on the portals, normally the images are a little bit smaller. Even if you zoom in, you won't really see much. All right, this is our third shot for the reception room, and it's 1-point perspective. Probably we don't really need the window view. I'm gonna leave it at 1/30th, to be honest. And let me switch on the lights. We really just have one. Let's see, maybe 1/50th for that. And let's go to, maybe it was 1/10th last time, so I'm just gonna go back to 1/10th. That's pretty bright. I don't see any. To be honest, the light coming off of that fan on the ceiling is not very strong, so I don't really think it will even need that luminosity one. Okay, we have our lights on, we have our window, so we're going to take the frame for our main photograph and we'll probably get to 1/10th. It is pretty bright. Okay, 1/13th. Okay, perfect. So now I'm going to set the shutter speed probably at 1/60th. Looks decent. So the first flash I'm gonna trigger from behind the camera. So it's basically just above from where my iPhone is recording. It's set currently at 1/4 of a power, and that's pretty decent. We could just work off of this frame. And again, if I would be in a hurry, that's really what I can do. I would put the lights on, take this one. We have 2 frames only, and it's very simple. But again, for the purposes of the video and just to kind of show you the process, I think people wanted to see how I would think about things when I'm on site. I'm going to take 2 more frames. I'm going to drop to 1/8 of a power plus 0.2. Let's see what we get. Okay, that looks good. Let's do one on the other side. Okay, so we've got what we need. All right, we're on our third shot here. So let's start with our flash frame. I'm going to reverse the order, make sure I drop my flash base layer on the bottom. We've got our fill flash. I'm not really even sure if we need to use it, but let's do. So I'm a little bit aware of that shadow here. I'm going to paint it in a way where it's not visible. So we have this shadow from the fan. All right. We're doing the fill from the other side. You know, if you want to add depth to your photo, you can add a little bit of shadows. I think in the corner we have the shadow from, this must be the curtain pole, I guess. So what I'm going to do, because we don't have it on our ambient layer, I'm just going to remove it using the healing brush. This one looks a little bit bright. I'm just going to drop opacity. Let's see if we can fix the shadow with this one. Yeah, it's a little bit bright there. Sometimes you add just more problems when you start fixing the base layer. Anyway, I'll just leave it as it is. We can work on that, no problem. We're adding hue saturation. I already have white selected from my previous selection. Let's drop opacity. We don't really even need to drop it much. 30 should work very well. Actually, even with it's pretty decent. The top is a little bit yellow, and I think that's coming from the floor, probably. From the orange floor. So I'm going to leave it at -31. That looks all right. One thing, again, I'm going to add it to the group. Let's add a white mask. And I'm going to draw around here very crude polygonal lasso selection. Because we know those greens were desaturated a little bit. I'm not worried about the wood or the flooring. It hasn't been really affected. So I'm just going to fill it with black, and it's going to remove that desaturation from the flooring. There's a little bit of discoloration. Again, I'm being like super picky. Like I wouldn't really worry about it again if I would be in a hurry. But for the sake of tutorial and wanting to explain how I would fix things. So I made another layer. I've changed blending mode to color, which means, you know, I can paint on it and only the color information will come through. So I'm just sampling a color from the flooring where it looks all right. And here where we have a little bit of this blue color coming from outside, I'm adding the green color. And that looks decent. Let's group that. Let's enable our luminosity layer. Let's drop opacity to 50. And I think we're not even going to bother about masking anything. I'll add curves. I always like to do it a little bit to my ambient layers. And add a little bit of an S-curve just to get a little bit of a brighter image for our real estate agent. And it is affecting our flooring color here a little bit. So what I might do is just draw very lightly on the flooring here with black brush, just to remove it a little bit from that selection. And we have our light. So let's just select lighten layer. I'm just going to make sure I've paint only on the light. Let's create a new layer, call it Fixes. I'm going to press J for my healing brush. Let's just make a couple fixes. I'm going to remove those hooks on the wall. And I think that's about, I mean, there's small things here and there. I'm really not going to work on that stuff. Maybe remove that chipped paint. They're actually repainting the flat, so that's going to be fixed. With the healing brush, you have to be careful not to get too close to contrasty areas, or otherwise it's going to affect it quite badly and smudge everything. So for those blending options, I always like to use my clone stamp. Okay, we have this thing here, and I think it's in the same spot, so I think that's actually on the wall itself, not the sensor dust. This is done, so let's save that and move on to the next one. Okay, so we've got our kind of kitchen shot. I'm gonna make another one of the kitchen in a moment, but this one was set up just to show there's also a door next to the kitchen, or a window. So there's some kind of a view and light. We're gonna start with this one. I'm going to take frame for our view out the window, then one with the lights as usual, and then we'll do main ambient and flash. Let's try and set a exposure for our windows. Let's start at 1/100th of a second. Still pretty bright. I think there is quite a bit of a difference between the building there in the back. I'll do 1/200. And then I'm gonna take maybe, let's see, 1/60th for the lower part of the view where the balcony is, because it's very dark, so I think I'm gonna combine both. Again, it's probably not something I would be really doing if I wouldn't have time, or I would be under time pressure. Here, I'm going to show you how I would resolve that to try and balance those two areas, because the foreground where the balcony is, it's dark if we want to get a good exposure on the building and the sky. So I'm gonna set it at, let's do maybe 1/40th even. Okay, 1/50th. We'll play with that later on. All right, let's get our lights for the kitchen on. So those under the counter lights, I think they'll work pretty well with luminosity layer. These cast a light on the wall itself, so I think that would work pretty decent. So the first exposure is basically just for pasting in the lights. And I'm going to grab the second exposure, let's see, at 1/13th of a second. And I think it looks pretty decent, maybe 1/10th. Might be a little bit much, I think. Let's try 1/13th, and we can always raise the exposure afterwards. Okay. Lights off. We might need to grab as well 2 frames. I'm not 100% sure, one for the kitchen and one for the window area. Looks pretty decent as well at this one. And I might take a little bit brighter one for the kitchen. I'm not 100% sure if we'll need it. Okay, so that's our ambient layers done. Now we're gonna do our flash. First one, I'm gonna pop from behind the camera as usual, and I'm gonna try and maneuver here. It's a little bit difficult because it's a very narrow space. It's very small. All right, let's drop our exposure down to, I think we'll go 1/125. Let's see. Yeah, I think that will look decent. I'm going to set it at, we might need 2 exposures from behind the camera. The first one I'll try and do at 8 plus 0.5. Let's see. I think that is pretty decent. Let me try and put it at 1/4 power and see what's the difference. But I think this one looks good. It's not too hot. Okay, I'm gonna drop it to maybe 1/8 of a power on the 8200, and let's see what we can do here. Okay, it's not bad. We actually might need to raise it. I'm going to raise it by 0.5 again and see. And let's move to the other side. That's not too bad. There's a little bit of a different white balance. The color is like very minty green. It's quite interesting. Okay, that's going to be good for sealing. Let me look back here. I just want to make sure that this corner here, it's very hot on my flash photo in the kitchen area. So I want to see that first frame we took looks pretty decent. So I think I'll be able to use it. All right, we've got our first kitchen shot. Let's remove visibility of the layers here. Got the lights, luminosity lights, and we've got our ambient. And then we've got our flash frames. So I think this is our base flash layer. So let's work off of that first here. Let's create a mask. I'm just going to paint that in. We have quite a lot of green on the ceiling. As you can see, it really, the light bounces off the cabinets and the green goes everywhere. So that's why the white balance was going so crazy here. So we might need a little bit of fixing here, but let's see. At the moment, I'm just adding black masks and I'm filling the frames with other good portions of the flash frames. Do we get anything particular here? Okay, we do get this shadow can be removed basically. Let's go back to this one. Okay, so this one has a hard shadow. This one removes this one. So again, I'm just looking at those shadows here and trying to get rid of them. Some of the stuff we unfortunately can't, but that's the way it is. All right, we're a bit hot. Let's see if we can fix it a little bit with curves. So I'm just going to do something like that, I think. Let's invert it. I'm gonna gently paint it in here just to cool down that hot spot. It's not perfect, but it looks a little bit better. Maybe this one here as well. I thought actually we had a frame to fix that, but maybe I'm wrong. Okay, flash frames are done. We're gonna have fun with getting our hue saturation and making fixes here. All right, let's add to our selection here. Might need to do a little bit of bigger masking around here. We'll see. Okay, I think that is pretty much everything. So let's drop it by, yeah, around -50, I guess. Let's put it inside a group, black mask on top. And I'm going to use my polygonal lasso tool. So even with that selection, it didn't affect the cabinet's color that much. But still, I'm just gonna work a little bit around that just to try and avoid desaturating those cabinets. They're really quite a interesting color. You always have option of doing it very rough and dirty by simply getting a brush and brushing around more or less, especially if those areas that you're trying to avoid, if they don't have much of the color removed from them, that won't be visible that much and it will save you time. But again, for the purposes of this video, I'm just going a little bit overboard on everything here. I think that curtain might be affected a little bit more, but we don't mind if it gets desaturated a little bit. I'm not worried about anything outside because I'm going to replace the window view anyway. So I think we can close the loop. Yeah. Okay, now we've got our selection. Let's make sure we have the white color selected, Alt backspace, and that's going to fill with the foreground color the areas we've selected. Okay, so we have now the balanced photo here. Let's put all of that in the group. And let's look. Okay, so we have our luminosity. I'm just going to go for easy option. I'm just going to drop it maybe to 40%. I think looks pretty decent. Let's add curves as usual. Clip it and add a little bit of an S curve. So you can see on the histogram, this is where the brightest parts of the image are. So I'm just even raising it a little bit more. These are the darks. And that looks decent. Sometimes you get discoloration. I think there's a little bit of discoloration here because of that shadow, which I guess is generated probably by the flash. So again, what we can do, create a new layer, make it a color blending mode. Let's grab our brush, sample color from the cabinet, and then let's just gently go over. As you can see, it removes that kind of nasty color in there. And I think this part as well is a little bit, it's missing some colors. I think was maybe too much flash on this. Okay, little fix, and that looks decent. Next we have our ambient with lights on, and then we're going to use luminosity mode on that. Actually, first I'm going to change the dark one to lighten layer. Let's hide everything, and I'm going to paint in those lights here at the top. And then let's see what we have here. Okay, let's add our luminosity. Okay, that helps to soften that transition between the light. Okay, I think I'm going to add a little bit of black on these under cabinet lights. On the mask. Okay, looks all right. Time to cut out our windows. Let's add a black mask, select polygonal lasso tool, and let's cut these out. All right, so let's use, what is it, Alt backspace, fill that with white color. I'm going to press Alt, drag the mask onto the top one. So now we have the darker version there. So I'm going to put the lighter one on top. Let's put it in the group, add a black mask, and I'm just going to paint the lower part in, so it's a little bit brighter. And maybe the one in the back there. So I'm gonna add a white mask and actually remove some of the, so the flooring is going crazy with the orange. I could also just use hue saturation and pull down on those colors. I kind of like that look. The only thing is, I think we might want to brighten up our windows. Yeah, I think something like this looks a little bit more natural. Let's do that. We kind of lose some parts of that outside view. They're a bit overblown, but I think in general it looks better. So let's save that and move on to the next one. Let's just continue with our usual stuff. I'm going to take exposure for the window. The window is a little bit dirty, to be honest. So we'll see what's the end result going to be. There's not like a particular view there. So I'm just going to drop it to 1/100th of a second. It's a little bit overexposed in a few areas, but I think it will be doable to recover that. Then I'm gonna put the lights on. What I forgot in the previous one was the one here. So I'm just going to put this one on as well. 1/60th. I'm gonna go to 1/50th. And the one for luminosity, let's see. Yeah, I think 1/13th looks okay. So we've got our window and light frames. Switch that off and let's take our ambient. We might need to take two because the part on the right hand side is a little bit dark, whereas the one in the back is looking pretty decent. Yeah, I'm gonna do 1/15th and let's go to 1/6 of a second. Maybe 1/8. Perfect. And we can continue with our flash. So I'm just going to drop it to, I think, 1/80th. It's going to be a little bit difficult because there's a difference in the ceiling here. So above the camera, the ceiling is higher. Okay, I'll set it at 1/4 of a power and let's see what it does. Yeah, it's a little bit bright. Actually, the balance is way off. The floor is bouncing back. I'm just going to move in a little bit. Just taking two shots, one very close to the left-hand side and one kind of in the middle. And I'll do one from here. I think we'll have to get one from here, so this is not as hot. So we just need a frame that's gonna be a little bit more balanced, but still brightening up that cupboard. Okay, that's pretty bright. I'm gonna drop power to 1/8 of a power and that's it. Okay, that's decent. Of course, on this part here, looks like it's hot, but I think our previous frames, I think they'll be okay. And if not, we're just going to try and edit later on in Photoshop. All right, we've got our second kitchen frame here. Let's start working on our flash layer. I think this is our base one. So I'm just going to reverse order of the layers, and I've made a shortcut for that. If you don't have it, I think you can go to Layer, Arrange, and Reverse. That's where it is. So let's see. Okay, we can use the left-hand side here. Brighten it up a little bit. And then something we can use on the other side. Okay, not perfect, but somewhere there. Let's try and see if we can do the same thing with our curves adjustment. Okay, let me just do it this way. Use the hand. See where we... Wait, did this work? Yeah, it's around there. Let's invert the selection, Control I, and I'm just going to dab that in a little bit just to retrieve that color in the cabinet. It's a little bit affecting it. You can also use the color to kind of fix that. So let's see if I change that to color. Let's sample here. Let's just add that on. Yeah, the hotspot is still there. I think, let's see what those changes. So those changes actually fixed it quite a bit. And then if we, or when we add our ambient layer, I think we're gonna fix it much better. Let's add hue saturation as usual. Do a color range. The selection from the previous one is already there. And pretty much everything is where it's supposed to be. I think we have everything selected. Let's press OK. Drop our saturation down. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at around 50. Put it in the group, add a black mask, and let's do a selection around. Let's use Alt Backspace to fill that with our foreground color, which is white. We actually might need to do a little bit more than that. Maybe increase the lightness a little bit as well. All right, I think that's okay. All right, that's our ambient layer. Wow, that's really off the balance there. Let's use it at, I guess 50% is usually where it's pretty decent. As usual, let me add curves. And let's add a white mask. I'm just going to very roughly remove the floor. And again, we have the same problem with the floor. Let's create a color layer, change blending mode to color. And just underneath the cabinets here, let's select the green. And let's paint that in so it's not distracting. Next, we have our lights. Let's change it to lighten. You can see reflection here. I'm not going to paint it in for the aesthetics. Let's add curves to this one. I forgot what's my shortcut for clipping. Okay, I'm just adding a little bit of brightness. Okay, so the color is a little bit on the red side, and now we have added some other parts here, so I'm just going to remove these. Right, let's see what happens if I'm going to add a hue saturation. Let's clip it. Let's select the color here, which is reds, and let's slide it towards yellows. Yeah, that looks better. I'm going to even add a little bit of saturation, and we have also this one here, which I think, yeah, that's magenta. So we're going to have to slide it a little bit again to make it a bit more consistent in terms of color. All right, let's open up our light layer with the luminosity designation. It's almost like adding another ambient layer on top, and actually that's another technique. You can be stacking the layers to add even more ambient to it. But I am mainly going just to paint in where the lights are, just to add a little bit of this feeling of the lights leaving some marks on the wall and so on. Not entirely sure if we need this bit here. I'm just going to remove the color or the light layer, but I'll leave the luminosity one. So that looks decent. I'm just going to leave it this way. I think it looks fine. Let's save that and move on to the next one. Okay, so I've set up a straight on shot. We don't really need to worry about the window too much. We're just gonna take 2 frames for our lights. So I'm just gonna put the lights on. And let's start at the usual 1/50th for the lights. And go up to 1/13th for the luminosity. which might be a little bit bright. Let's see, 1/15. I think that's going to be okay. All right, I'm going to put the lights off. I might take 2 frames here. I think the back looks pretty decent. I'm going to take it at 1/15 as well. But I'm going also to go up a stop to 1/8 just for that cupboard on the right hand side. We'll go for 1/80. We're not totally cutting out all light, so we can see it's still beaming in. 1/80 looks, I think, decent. Flash is at 1/8 of a power. All right, let's get the flash pop. Yeah, that looks pretty decent. There's a lot of, I think the white balance is going a little bit crazy because on the tablet here I can see the walls are having a lot of magenta. I'm going to take one from here. Not much space. It's difficult. And that frame is basically for this because the previous one was quite bright. Yeah, it's a bit of a difficult one. We need to lower the power. So I'm gonna shoot one at an angle just to see if I can get a good exposure on that. I think that will have to do. Okay, we have what we have, so we'll have to just go with it. Right, so we have our last kitchen frame. This one was shot, I think, at 24 millimeters. You can already see that different look. I really like anything over 24 millimeters starts looking pretty good. Right, let's start with our base layer. And which one would that be? I believe this one. I think I'm in the frame there somewhere. Okay, let's use this one at the end. Okay, use the black mask here. Add a little bit of cleanup here. Sure, maybe here a little bit. It's a bit dark. Let's go back on that a little bit. Flambient has such a different look as well. It's very, very unique. I'm just thinking how flat everything looks. I was almost adding some parts of the image towards the camera a little bit darker just to create a little bit of that dimension. But then again, I'm doing a Flambient here for real estate, so I'm just going to keep it like that. Okay, I like this fairly high. I'm going just to add a mask and remove the bottom part. The floor is way too orangey when I use it in luminosity. Okay, that's luminosity for our lights. So first let's change the lights to lighten mode. We have a very similar problem like the last time. So let's see if we can use curves a little bit. See what we can do. I'm gonna leave it. I don't want the abrupt end between where the light finishes and the wall. So I think I'll have to increase it and I'll just have to paint in. And on top of that, we need hue saturation adjustment to change the color of the light. So again, we're going to move it more towards yellow or orange, and the same for these ones here. Okay. So let's paint these in. If we use a soft brush, that should look pretty natural. smaller brush here, so I'm just painting in those lights. I've got this one here. It's, to be honest, it's cut off a little bit. I don't even know. We might remove that light, actually, I think, at the end. It's just, I don't like that it's cut in half. Yeah, I'm not gonna bother about that. Okay, I forgot one thing. We need to desaturate walls and ceilings. So it actually remembers our selection from the previous one very well. Let's drop that and increase lightness a little bit, put it in the group. And let's do our cutting out again. All right, let's reset our colors with D and then press Alt Backspace to fill it with white. Let's have a look. Oops, it does look better. Do we need more lightness? I don't want it to be crazy looking. Yeah, I think we're just going to leave it like that. Maybe we should desaturate it even more. In this situation, it was super extreme. Okay, we've got our lights and then the luminosity. Funnily enough, the luminosity doesn't add that much, but there's some areas that do look good. What was going on here? We don't need this one here. All right, so that's pretty much it. Just as I mentioned before, I'm going to remove that light. It's just distracting, so using the healing brush very fast. Let's save that. Oh, there's another thing I've just noticed again. Just me trying to be perfectionist. Let's sample the color here and remove that color cast from the shadow. So I've created a new layer, changed blending mode to color. And now we can save it and move on to the next one, which I think is the bathroom shot. Okay, so as you can see, we're in a very small bathroom, especially small like this without the windows. I'm not even bothering trying to take frame without light. They will always look better with the lights. I might take 2 frames for our ambient layer. One thing I always have to remember is I have to readjust my focus. I think 1/3 of a second is our bright layer. And let's drop it a stop to 1/6 and see where we are. I think that's okay. I'm going to drop to 1/80th of a second just because we have such a big bloom on the lights. I want to make sure that the flash kind of overpowers it quite well and shows the lights a little bit better. I'm going to start at 1/32nd of power plus 0.6. I'm just going to get one off from above the camera. And let's see, that's actually very good exposure. I'll try and do the shower, drop the power 1/64th plus 0.5. And I'll try and do a pop on both sides as much as possible. I think that looks pretty decent. Maybe we need a little bit more power. Let's see if I do 1/32nd. It's a little bit bright. All right, now this side, I have to try and squeeze in here. We have a shadow from the shower head, which is a bit of a problem. Let's see if I can drop the flash here. Let's trigger and see what happens. That's not bad. We'll probably can use that. Just for the ceiling, I'm going to drop it so it's not overpowering. Let's see, 1/64th of power. Let's try that again. All right, let's not spend too much time on that. To be honest, it's a very small bathroom, so no need for that. All right, we've got our bathroom shot. So our ambient, then we have our base layer, and we've got 2 frames for the shower, which to be honest, we don't really need. let's change blending mode to luminosity for our ambient layer. We drop it to 70%, and you could just leave it like that, to be honest, and you already have pretty well edited photo. But what I am going to do is first let's get our shower. So let's change the mode to lighten, so we only let any brighter pixels come through, just so we don't mess up the balance on the rest of our flash layer. Okay, let's look at this one. Again, let's go with lighten mode, see what's going on here. It actually doesn't add that much. I mean, maybe if you're looking for some cool look, we could add that part here, but the light is not coming from anywhere, so I think that's it really. Okay, let's add hue saturation. Let's sample the colors. Just remove this for the time being. Okay, I think this will do. Let's desaturate this and think, how do we want to go about? Okay, let's put in the group and let's add a white mask, and then we're just going to remove selection. Okay, and let's add the flooring as well. Again, we were totally fine with just that first frame without even desaturating anything. I'm just doing it to show you how I would go about that. Okay, we've got our color back in those areas. So I think that is decent. Let's do, okay, 60%. Let's add white mask, and I'm just going to remove a little bit of ambient layer, just so the lights are a bit better visible. I should have gotten a better exposure for those lights. Also going to remove this one here. So what we could try and do is add a color layer. Let's sample one of those yellows. We can add a little bit of the yellow color just to make it look like we have, because otherwise it looks a little bit white and blue only. I think that's all right. Let's see if we can add curves. Okay, that's going to make it a bit more punchy. All right, I think that's good enough. Let's start. Since this has got a window, we're going to take a window frame, our light frames, then our ambient and flash as usual. Okay, let me actually start with our window frame. We might need to take two here. So I'll do one at 1/50th. I need to remember, I already forgot, we have to change our focus on the camera. We just finished the bathroom, so the focus was set to 1 meter. Now we need to set it just around 3. Let's retake this shot, drop it by 1 stop to 1/100. Let's switch on the light. I think, to be honest, we don't even need to take luminance because this light is not affecting almost at all anything. So I'm just going to leave it like that. Let's take frame for the inside. I might take 2 because the right side of the image is pretty dark. Let's do 1/13 and maybe 1/20. Yeah, I think 1/20. For our flash, I'm going to drop it to 1/60. I'm going to set flash at 1/8 of a power. Place it just above the camera here. Let's give it a pop and see. To be honest, this looks pretty decent for the right-hand side of the image. I'm going to increase the power by 0.6, so it's 1/8 plus 0.6. And let's get another one out. Okay, and that's actually pretty decent frame to use for the whole image if we want. But I am going to go and take 2 other frames. There is a little bit of a shadow coming from the ceiling fan. That's probably what we want to eliminate. Again, you could probably work off of 1 frame if you really wanted to and edit it, and probably in the blending it wouldn't look too bad. These walls are a little bit of a different color, so it is a little bit kind of a grayish with a little bit hint of blue, maybe something like that. I'm just going to point it a little bit more towards the ceiling. And sometimes if you don't want to do window pulls, if you look at the previous frame, if I go here, you can see there is a hotspot from the flash here. So by me taking a photo on this side, we eliminated this hotspot. If you have it in the, let's say, the left window here, I would go to the right-hand side, pop the flash, and that will make sure that there's no reflection in the window. And obviously, if there's one appearing on this side, I would move to here and pop from here. And we actually need to pop one for the other side there. So let's do that for the wall and just to remove the shadow. Okay, that looks pretty decent. We might be a little bit closer. I'm just going to move back a little bit more and see if we can eliminate some of that hot spot. Yeah, okay, at least that eliminates it. If you want, you can use the window frame from the flash. The only problem is that a lot of times there's quite a bit of reflections coming in, and also you're going to have typically much cooler temperature outside. I do like to keep it balanced, whereas the inside has the correct balance and the outside has a correct balance. But again, that's going to take a little bit more time. It's probably for a bit more luxury property rather than a typical run-of-the-mill apartments for real estate agents. Really up to you. Okay, so we've got our master bedroom here. Let's go to our flash frame. So I'm adding a black mask and just using the fill flash on the left-hand side and the fill flash on the right-hand side. What I like about these is they brighten up areas around windows, which I think is fairly natural because, you know, where the windows are, it's going to be much brighter. So if you can get those frames bright, it will give it a little bit more of that natural look. Now this is, I think, the only bedroom that had a little bit of a different color, kind of purple magenta on the walls. So that wasn't white. We could leave the view as it is. The only thing, we just grab our luminosity or the ambient layer and change it to luminosity, and we drop again maybe to around 50%. I am going to add our hue saturation, just as I said, to be consistent. All right, that seems to be okay. Let's desaturate maybe around -40, add a group. I'll press Ctrl F to hide everything. And then I'm going to add a selection around the ceiling, but also around here. This is supposed to be white. All right, first let's go this way and around here. Okay, I think I've overshot it a little bit, but we can correct it in a little bit. Right, I'm not gonna bother too much about that pole. And double click to close the selection. And let's go back here and press. Actually, I really don't know. It seems like we're missing part here. But then it looks like we overshot on the other part a little bit. So I'm going to press Alt to remove from selection. I'm going to remove around here. And let's close it. Okay. All right, let's do selection around here as well, just to be consistent. I'm not going to make a super accurate selection. And that's the question. I think, right, well, we might need to go back because I don't want to desaturate the wall, only the frames, I guess, because this wall in theory is supposed to be a little bit of a purple magenta color. And the bottom part. So let's see, we need to go back here to remove that wall. Okay, I think that will work. And then let's do skirting here. All right, let's press D to reset our colors. Alt backspace to fill that with white. And that looks a little bit better. There's not that much change. Let's see. Yeah, definitely. Right, I'm going to drop it to -60 or so. Let's add our ambient. That looks decent. Let's add, as usual, curves, just to brighten it up a little bit and create a little bit more contrast. And I'm going to add a new layer, change it to color. Let's select our polygonal lasso tool. I'm just going to make a little selection around here. Let's sample color from here and paint that in on this side. Just looks to me like it's a little bit off. I think it's better now. Let's see. Yeah. Maybe have too much of a purple there now. Okay, I'm going to drop opacity maybe to 50%. Next, we have our lights, so let's just change it to lighten mode. I think I've got Shift Control M just not to do it as an adjustment, but as just the curves. Okay, somewhere around here. Let's hide it, and I'm just going to paint in this area here. All right, and then we have our window. So again, we have a very simple rectangular windows here. We can make a quick cut around that. Again, if I would have something like blinds or something along those lines, then I would probably do a window pull. But I find it actually much better result doing it fully with a specific window frame. All right, Alt backspace. That looks pretty, a little bit dark. So while it's still selected, I'm adding curves, and it's gonna add that selection to the mask of curves. And I'm just going to raise that a little bit. Yeah, the windows here are a bit dirty. Okay. Let's save that and move to the next one. I think we're gonna leave the sky as it is. Okay, so we've got our next angle set up, and this one is going to be a little bit interesting because we do have a mirror here, which is going to make it even a little bit more difficult to try and remove it. Also, what I'm noticing here, and it's going to be a problem, but I do want to leave this angle of the shot as it is. I don't want to move the camera closer. So the problem we're going to have is basically the left-hand side of the radiator. We don't have much of it at all. So it's going to be difficult to replicate. There's two things we might do. One thing that I've actually learned from Fraser Almeida is we might take a shot from there looking at the radiator and then use that. Or the other option is we might cut the right-hand side of the radiator and then flip it horizontally and then try and place it there. So I don't know yet how it's going to work out, but we'll have to deal with it. Because we have a mirror, I don't have anywhere really to hide behind the camera, so I prefer to leave the doors open. I could potentially actually close it as well. Yeah, let's do that. I'm going to take one with the light on first. And to be honest, for the lights on, I don't even need to worry about myself being in the photo because I'm just going to use that part at the top. So let's drop our exposure to, I think 1/50th is okay. There's a little bit overexposure on the image, but I'm sure we'll be able to get it resolved. So I'm just looking at the back at the view. It's a little bit dark. We probably want it brighter. So let's see if it goes up a stop to 1/25th. And I think that looks decent. We can make it a little bit brighter or darker if we need. Okay. The other option is also, which could be okay, some situations. I didn't want to close the door. The reason I didn't want to close the door is that when I close it back and open it and then close it again, it might have a little bit of a different spot. No one would notice it, especially there in the dark corner, but just to be aware of those things. When you close the door, some doors stick a little bit and it might not go into exactly the same spot. Now, obviously, we'll have a frame that we can use so we can make it so it's fully flush there and we're not overlaying any ambient on it, and that's going to keep the door in the correct place. But the other thing we can do also is we can close the door. Actually, let's do that. I'm going to shut the lights off, close the door, and obviously now I'm in the frame. I cannot hide behind the camera because we have mirror there. But what I'm going to do, let's find the exposure we want to use. We don't even need to take exposure for that view in the window because the light itself doesn't generate any reflection in that. So I think we should be fine. Let's take one. Since this is a tutorial, I'm gonna do that. Maybe 1/15th. Again, I can be in the image standing here because we're just going to be using the part in the shot here. So that's pretty okay. And now I want to get exposure that we're going to be using for our ambient. So probably somewhere around 1/8. I think 1/8 or 1/10. 1/10 look decent. So obviously now I'm in the shot. One thing I would notice, I'm generating a pretty big shadow here. So I'm going to take the shot here and then I'm going to move basically to this side where the mirror is. And I'm going to take the shot again with exactly the same settings. And then when I'm combining ambient in the Photoshop later on, I will use one part of the image where I'm not visible and combine it with the other one. Okay, so with that said, we have our exposures. Let's drop shutter speed right now to 1/60th. We could potentially do 1/50th as well. I'm trying to avoid walking too close to the curtain. If I'll move it, it actually is visible in the mirror, so I have to be aware of that. I'm actually going to put the power on AD 200 to 1/4 of a power, and let's do a pop. So this is what I would look at as our base frame. And I think it's pretty decent. Actually, it's a little bit bright. Let's just leave it. I don't want to complicate it. I'm almost always during the tutorials trying to get the perfect frames, but I think it's important to know that you don't have to. Raw files, range on them today is amazing. So you don't have to worry about it too much. Let's pop one from here. So this is basically to try and get the mirror there clean. That looks decent. I'm actually going to move here and do one here as well. I think there's a shadow I can see being casted that's decent. And let's move to this side. That looks okay. Okay, I'm just trying to see if I can get a frame that's going to give us a good exposure near the door. It's a little bit difficult, so I'm just going to leave it as it is, and we're going to see what we can do in editing. Okay, so I did forget to take a photo of the radiator, so we've got a little bit of a problem there. We're going to have to rely on remove tool, hopefully. Let's get our flash frames first. So, okay, I think this is going to be our base frame, so let's reverse order of the frames. Okay, so let's add a black mask to this one and let's paint it in. I'm just going to increase the flow to 20. Okay. Oops. I think we really need this one. Just removes a little bit of that shadow there. All right, let's leave it like that. And we have those frames here. I really don't even know if we need them. It's a little bit darker there, but it's not going to increase the quality that much, so yeah. Just going to darken that a little bit. It's overblown. So let's do our desaturation. Just pressing or holding Shift and adding to our selection. Okay, I guess these were white. Okay, let's just do that. Again, I probably wouldn't bother really about this desaturation thing if I would be in a hurry. It's not gonna dramatically increase the quality. It's going to look a little bit better, but I guess, again, you have to think about time versus quality and how much you want to tip the scale in either direction. So I'm dropping the saturation to around 50, 60, just like the previous one. Let's put it in the group. Actually, let's add a black mask. And right, let's select the ceiling. I think I really might just do the ceiling and leave the rest. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. It's going to be good enough. All right, Alt backspace, before and after. Not major difference, but there is a difference. Let's create a new layer for color. So on the edge here, we have a discoloration here. I'm going to make a selection around it. Let's select the brush tool. I'm going to sample from this part here. I'm just going to paint that in on the other side. Okay. I think that looks better. Okay, this shadow here is quite massive. All right, it's going from this one. No. Okay. Is it this one, I think? Oh no, the one underneath, but... Okay. Right, we'll have to leave it like that. Let's see if I add curves, I can... balance it a little bit more. Yeah, we cannot win here. Right, let's see. Okay, let's split the difference. I'm just going to drop opacity to around 50. Let's see what happens if we add our ambient, and if we still have a problem, we can use remove tool or healing brush to work on that. So here's what I was saying. So I couldn't stand behind the camera because obviously we have mirror, and I didn't want to leave the room because I would have to open and close the door. And even though it would close the same, most likely, there's sometimes doors that stick a little bit or they might not fully close. So you might have a little bit of a misalignment. In this situation, it wouldn't matter because the door is fairly like almost invisible there. And even if it would move and there would be slight offset or anything like that, I could just erase the ambient layer from the door and just use fully flash on that, for example. But this is what I would do. Sometimes this is what I do as well in bathrooms that I need to be inside to take photos, but it's very small and I can see myself in the mirror. You know, I'll stand on one part of the image like here, and I'll take another one here, and then we just combine them. So I'm just going to erase myself by painting in the other layer on top. Okay, we don't have fully white color, so it's not disappearing. It's disappearing now. And that's how we can create an ambient layer, even if I don't have a way to hide away from the camera. So this is our ambient. I'm going to group it. I'll call it ambient, and now it's basically treated as one layer. Let's change blending mode to, luminosity. And I'm going to drop it maybe, something around 50–60% looks decent. Let's add curves. I'm going to clip it to my ambient layer. And let's add a little bit of a crunch or a punch. Okay, then we have our light. So let's change it to lighten mode. I'm going to add curves adjustment, just a little bit so it doesn't look so orangey. Okay, so let's put a mask on that. Let's reduce the size and paint the light in. All right, now the annoying part. Before that, let's try and also remove or desaturate the ceiling in the mirror. Okay, fill that with white. All right, and let's add our fixes layer. First thing is I'm going just to go around areas. For example, they're going to repaint the walls, so I'm just going to remove those little bits and pieces here. is just I'm pressing Alt, sampling, painting in, pressing Alt, sampling, painting in. You know, we can fix those areas here as well. So I guess there was a door here maybe, or something, or like a lock. So that didn't align very well. Let's try that again. Actually might use clone stamp for this. Again, I don't really think we need to do that. For these type of fixes, you can just spend a lot of time and you'll never be finished. So, you know, you have to know where to say, okay, that's enough. I'm just basically copying from the area that looks fine and trying to align it properly. Okay, there was one bit here. Just like little things here and there. Okay, for the most part, I think that's done. So we're only left with our... Okay, let's fix this part here, even though it's not anything crazy. As I said, there's always something. Okay, let's just move on to this thing here. So I think what I'm going to do first, I'm going to try and use Remove Tool. And yeah, I'll just draw around here. What I might do is just go here. Just try and remove the top part. And see how it works, if it's doing a decent job. All right, that's not bad. So now let's say remove that leg here. Okay, decent job. I can fix that. All right, let's try this. That's going to be the worst. Oops, it's a bit too much. Right, let's see where it takes us. Okay, not bad. So let's first grab our healing brush. I'm going to make some adjustments here, make little fixes for those areas. It left some little artifacts here and there. It actually did a pretty good job, to be honest. It would have been a little bit of a nightmare having to do it manually. Oops. So I'm just simply sampling different parts of that radiator and trying to replace the artifacts with them. It's not perfect, but it's almost there. See if I can straighten this. Okay, it looks better. Sorry, I've got OCD sometimes for different little things like that. Right, let's remove that. Right, so we can either kind of leave it like that, which looks decent, but if we want to be a little bit more accurate, what we could do, let's press Ctrl Alt Shift E, get all of that merged into a new layer, and I'm going to make a selection around here, press Ctrl J, that's going to make a copy via cut. Now we can move it. Let's press Ctrl T, right click, flip horizontal. Okay, let's see. Need a little bit of matching here. We might need to use distort a little bit. Okay, I think that's all right. Let's add, let's add a white mask. I'm going to put the flow at 100, increase the hardness, and I'm going to start removing parts around. Yeah, I think. All right, let me use the polygonal lasso tool around here, just so we're a little bit faster on that. Just basically making selection around so that I don't erase anything I don't want to. Now I can actually make the brush soft, so decrease the hardness to 0. And we kind of recreated that thing there. This part looks a little bit funny. So let's group both fix layers, merge them, and I'm going to use healing brush and do a little bit of blending. So I'm just going to go through here and blend this a little bit. I think now looks better. Yeah, there's a few other things we could fix here. I mean, I don't want to spend any more time on this one, so let's save that and move on to the next one. We're in the second bedroom. It's very, very small. I'm just taking the main kind of shot from the door as we walk in. We might actually, even though it's a small bedroom, I'll take probably 2 shots. One from the corner here, just because you can have a look through the windows, which I think we want to see. And then the other one, we want to see what's on the other side of the room, so where the camera is. Again, we're going through the whole process, and I'm taking a little bit more frames that I need. So let's take our window. So it looks like 1/25th of a second looks decent here. Let's switch on the lights. I think that's 1/50th from what I remember. Looks pretty decent, maybe 1/60th. Okay, I'm not taking the luminosity. We don't need it. This is only one light, doesn't give too much of the light anyway. Let's see what's our exposure for the ambient. I think 1/10 or 1/8 should be okay. I think 1/8 is a little bit brighter, but I think looks decent. And then I'm gonna drop shutter speed to 1/60th. Our flash is set to 1/8 plus 0.5. Just gonna get a shot from behind or just above the camera. In all honesty, I think that looks pretty decent. If you're exposing for the windows and you're using the flash, you can see windows quite a bit on this exposure. It's actually probably a little bit too dark, at least in my taste. But if you're exposing for the windows on all your flash pops, then as I said, right now you can see on the right-hand side, we have the hot spot. So to mitigate it, let me just drop here the power a little bit to 1/8. I'm gonna move to the left side of the room. I'm gonna pop the flash from here. And that is going to eliminate that flash in there. So if you look there, view from the windows now looks fine, and you could just use that instead of, you know, even cutting in our exposure for the windows. It's a balance between time and quality, time and quality. Some properties will require you to cut out the view, some of them don't. Now, I typically don't really do window pulls, mainly because the flash, especially at higher powers, generates quite a lot of reflections, and for me, it's a little bit problematic. We might try it actually to do a window pull after this shot. I generally prefer to cut it out, especially if I have windows like that. They're not too much work, to be honest. If you're getting paid a lot, you can bump up the quality, spend more time. If you paid peanuts for the particular property, you drop the quality a little bit and deliver something that's worth the money that the agents are paying. Okay, I think that's fine. So actually that shot here also fixed our left-hand side of the photo where, you know, the one from behind the camera was quite hot. So I think we're fine. Right, so we've got our second bedroom. Let's look at the flash layers. Right, let's drop this one on the bottom. Add a mask. Brighten this up. Okay, that's oh, my flow is at 100, so quite strong. I think I'm just gonna double a little bit here just to darken it a little bit. And if we change our luminosity down to 50%, what we could do, just add a mask. You can cut out windows even this way if you want. So just to make it fast. And then basically fill that with black. So we only have the flash layer there. And we have our window view, so we don't need to cut anything. And if you want, you can add back a little bit of luminosity just to make it a little bit more natural. We can enable lights. Let's change it to lighten. I'll turn it on and off. It doesn't really affect much outside of that light, a little bit here. And that's it. But obviously we can also cut out the windows. As I said, I prefer to white balance the windows to the correct temperature as my eyes would see it. So right now, because we've balanced flash for the inside. The outside is too cold or too cool. Too many blues in the white balance. Okay. All right, let's fill it with white. So Alt and backspace for the foreground color. And we have that. I think we can mix both. It's a little bit too yellow, too green in that. A few things we could do. We can add camera raw filter, or we can go to color balance adjustment layer. Let's clip that. And so we have too much green, so we can add a little bit of magenta. And if we want, we can again add yellows or blues. Maybe I'll add a little blue. So that is one option. Okay, let me turn this off. So if we add camera raw, we can mess with temperature here as well. So difficult to balance this for me. Anyway, let's not spend too much time on that. What we can do is drop opacity here a little bit so we mix both. We remove that color balance. And let's call it a day. I haven't even desaturated, and you see it looks fine. So let's save that and move on to the next one. I thought the view is going to be visible much better from that angle, but it's actually not. Let's take our frame for the windows. 1/125 I think will do. And to be honest, this is an overkill. I'm really doing it like way overkilling it, but this is for the purposes of the tutorial. And then I'm going to take a brighter one for that view closer to the foreground. And I think 1/50th looks decent. Let's take one for the lights. I'll do 1/80th. Let's turn these off. Now let's take our ambient. We might need two. Let's do 1/4 kind of for where the corridor and other room is. And then 1/8 maybe for the main room. Maybe 1/6. Okay, let's just do that. And then let's drop shutter speed to 1/60th. And let's get one shot from behind the camera. That looks decent. We can probably just use this one. Let's get one from the corridor to light up the corridor. Okay, that is decent. Then let's get one in the other bedroom. Okay, that looks decent. And actually I said we're going to do the window pull. So we need to decide what's our shutter speed for this. With 1/80th, the sky is overexposed and the foreground is a little bit on the darker side. I think we'll go with that. Let's see, it's not a big deal. I probably won't really use the window pull anyway. So I've got my flash set to 1/8 of a power. Yeah, as you can see, I already see there's a reflection. I mean, it's gonna be easier for me just to cut it out, I think. Let me see if I can do one straight on. Yeah, the reflection is still there. What if I try a very extreme angle here? Yeah, all of this has got those reflections. And I know Nathan Cool takes the repair layers, which basically is what I use to cut out the windows in these situations. Now, if I would be having blinds, then yeah, I wouldn't really bother about trying to cut it out. I would just make a window pull. Right, so with this one, again, let's start with our flash frames. So we have the hallway, the inside. Oh no, that was, yeah, I took one for window pull. That's for later on. Okay, we have the flash here. Let's put the other ones on top. So we only took one flash. These ones I'm going to change to lighten mode. And I'm actually going to go in there manually here. We have some discoloration if we just use the full frame, so I'm just going to limit it to that room. Alt backspace. You can drop opacity just a little bit. And let's see what happens if we put this one in lighten mode. That's not too bad. Keep it at 90%, I think. And we have a lot of mismatching color balance between these two. So let's add hue saturation, add color range, and yeah, it kind of selected everything. So let's press OK. Drop the opacity, saturation, maybe around 50. So let's add it into a group. I'm going to add a white layer mask, and I'm just going to select these areas here. To be honest, I don't really think we need to add the curtains. Okay, let's control backspace to fill it with the background color, which is black. So we're removing that from the selection, and we have a little bit of trouble because of that lighten mode. There's a discoloration here. So let's add a layer, change it to color blending mode. And I'm going to use polygonal lasso tool here. Let's separate these areas here. To be honest, I think it's just that. Maybe a little bit on the other side. Okay, let me add this one as well. Double click to close. And I'm going to select my brush tool, press D to reset colors, select white brush, and I'm just going to gently paint it in. Tap that in. Still this bluish one visible here. Okay, I think that's our flash frame. So let's put that in the group. So we've taken 2 frames. Okay, since we've got those 2 ambient layers, let me quickly cut out around the frame here. Double click to close, press Alt backspace. Let's paste it in. Let's group these 2. That's our ambient, so let's change it to luminosity. Let's drop opacity. 50% looks good. I'm going to add white mask, and let's make a selection with our polygonal lasso tool more or less around the floor here. We can actually add hue saturation here and basically desaturate that a little bit so it's not that strong. And I think that looks decent. Let's see our frames. So we have lights. Let's change it to lighten. And let's just add the regular curves here. Increase the brightness in the mids. Try to drop kind of the whites as much as possible before it starts breaking apart. I think that's okay. So let's just paint that in. And then we have our window view. But here's the window pull I did. So if I'll change it to darken, you can see the windows are being darkened. So I'm just going to draw a very rough selection around the windows. Let's press Alt, backspace, fill that with white, and we've pasted our windows, and that's our window pool. But as you can see, there's a lot of glare or reflection in the window. That's why for those type of windows, it's so easy to cut them out. I just prefer to add a black mask to that. Let's just use our polygonal lasso tool. Go around, get these areas selected around the windows. Okay, this side we have the curtain, but it's not too bad. It's manageable. I can still do it quite fast with the pen. Let's add to the selection. All right, Alt backspace. We've pasted our window. So this is our window cutout, and here we have the window pull. So you can see there's a lot of glare, and I've tried a few different angles, and you've seen, you know, the glare was there. So this creates much better look. Let's see if we can actually replace the sky. So let me go into my sky selection here from Sky Solution. And let's select something, maybe this one. Let's just drop that here. I'm going to scale it down quite a bit. I think where we have clouds might be right around here. Okay, let's remove that window pull. I'll put everything in the group, drop my sky underneath. Let's get our lasso tool. I'm going to make a rough selection here around the building. Doesn't have to be super accurate. We can, of course, we will use the color range tool, and we can tighten the selection or the fuzziness on that thing. But still, the closer we get to selecting just the areas we want to select, the better. So let's press Shift Control R. Sorry, that's my own shortcut. So it wouldn't work for you unless you add it yourself. Okay, so I've just added the sky here, literally just one click. Let's press Alt and the mask tool, and we've added our sky. So let's see, I think that we'll need curves adjustment here. Let's brighten it up so it's not as dark. And I think for the windows we'll probably do something similar, a little bit more brighter and a little bit more contrast. I think that looks decent enough. Might actually need to add curves as well to our ambient. Not too much. All right, let's save that and move on to our last photo. We're going to start actually, since there's no windows, I'm just going to take the frames for light layer. And since there is light outside, I'm going to probably take, I don't really think we'll need luminosity one for this. I'm gonna drop to 1/60th for the light above here. All right, lights off. And we're going to take our ambient layers. So let's find one for our room. Okay, that's too bright, but since we're already bright, I'm going to take this one for the hallway. And let's drop to 1/6 of a second and see if that's going to be okay for the room. Yeah, it looks a little bit dark, but the histogram is really to the right. Okay, let's use that. Dropping my shutter speed to 1/60th, 1/8 of a power. And I'm just gonna pop a flash from the right-hand side where the door is. Okay, we have a hot spot. See if I can take one from the other side that we can combine with the right side. Yeah, that's still a bit bright. So what I'm going to do is drop power to 1/16 of a second. Okay, that looks decent. Going back to 1/8. Let's get one off from the top here. The walls are white here, so I'm just going to aim at the corner where the ceiling and the walls meet. And it looks decent, but it caught me in the image. I mean, to be honest, this is easy for removal, but okay. And again, this should be totally fine to use, but we have a shadow coming in this area, which is quite visible. And sometimes if you look at the image on your preview, it might look okay, but then when you start editing, drop the highlights, the shadow actually becomes much more visible. So you have to be aware of this as well. For that reason, I'm just going to get a shot from here. I dropped the power to 1/16 plus 0.5. Okay, looks decent, but I'm just going to move back just so I have more of frame I can use here. I think that is done. Okay, let's see what we have here. Lights. Whoa, that is bright. I guess that's for the hallway, that's for the inside, and then we have 2 flash frames. Let's drop the base on the bottom. Let's add a black mask to the second flash layer. I'm just going to paint that in here. Right, I think screen will be a little bit better in this situation, although let's see lighten and what happens if we add adjustment, curves adjustment. Okay, that will actually be decent. So let's add white mask. I'm just going to paint with black on the left-hand side, just so we have darker frame there. So the next one I use here, we can brighten that area up. So I'll do the same, add curves and brighten it up. Add white mask, and let's get rid of this side here. Okay, I don't want to spend too much on that. Let's add hue saturation. Perfect. Let's desaturate. Okay, if I desaturate fully, it actually keeps a lot of colors there, so that's good. We don't need much. Let's add it into a group, add a white mask. I'm going to select my polygonal lasso tool. I'll go around here to select doors and the floor. Double click to close the selection. And I guess we're gonna add this one as well. All right, so let's press Control Backspace. That's gonna fill that with black. And let me add color layer. I'm just a little bit annoyed. There's a little bit of like a magenta purple color here, so I want to get rid of that. Let's set the boundary here. B for brush. I'm going to sample color from the flooring. Just gently paint over. Okay, I actually need to put that layer above because it was within the group that was hiding it. All right, let me rename that to color. Okay, our flash layer is done. Do we actually really need this bright one? Probably not. Let's just go to luminosity, drop opacity, maybe to around 50–60%. That works good. Add curves. Brighten it up a little bit. And yeah, let's add a white mask. And then let's just make a selection around here. Right, let's set this at 100% flow, but change opacity maybe to 30. And let's just do a sweep with the black color. 1, 2, 3. I think that looks decent. Maybe 4. Okay. Yeah, let's leave it like that. So we can delete the super bright ambient. We've got the light layer, so let's change it to lighten mode. I'm going to press Shift Control M. Actually, that's my own shortcut again, so don't worry about it. Just to add regular curves, so I'm just going to embed them in that layer. That looks decent. Let's just paint that in from the mask. All right, let's add another layer. Let's call it fixes. Oops. Fixes, and I'm going to select J for the healing brush. Just to remove that. Okay, so that's all the editing done. Now I'm going to jump into Lightroom and make final adjustments. All right, so I'm back in Lightroom. I've got all the photos I've edited here. I've marked them with a red label, just so it's easier to filter them. Let's go through doing those final touches to the images. Let's go and add a little bit of contrast. As you can see on the both sides of the histogram, we have quite a bit of space. So let's add maybe around 12. I'm going to drop the highlights a little bit and then add whites. I'm holding Alt so I can see where we start to clip. So around 23 we start clipping. And this is mainly for real estate agents. I add a bit of shadows and we can drop blacks. So let's see. I'm holding Alt again so I see them just appearing here at -26. So that's quite a bit. Let's see before and after. There's a little bit of punch. Do we want to add clarity? No, I'm just going to leave it for the time being. At the color, the flooring is a little bit strong, so I'm just going to drop saturation on the oranges and maybe increase luminance a little bit. Apart from that, I think we're okay. And then let's do the guided adjustments. For that, I'm going to use my mouse because it's a little bit more annoying with the pen. So let's find corner of the images and some of the vertical lines we can follow. So that's one. And I think we have two options, either the door or the cabinet. I think the door is a bit longer, so I might just use the door here. Okay, Shift T to get rid of the tool. So you can press on and off to kind of see the adjustments. Definitely that looks better. So now let's Shift click the rest of the images. I'm going to sync them. I'm just going to untick transform because I don't want the same transform to be added to the other ones. And let's have a look. Okay. We have the radiator here. Let's use it as our vertical. And maybe the door frame for the other one. And before and after, definitely looking better. Right, we have our 1-point perspective. I think we have quite a bit of wiggle room here just to increase the whites here. Okay, let's press Shift-T for the transform tool. And first I'm going to start with our vertical lines. Let's use the doors here. And now let's get our horizontal lines. So maybe the one at the top here looks decent. That's one, and maybe this one here, I think. Okay, let's use that piece of wood. Shift-T again, and let's see before and after. So we have quite a bit of result here. Okay, I think you get the idea of correcting verticals. I'm not going to go through all of them. I don't want to waste your time. I just wanted to say thank you for watching the video. If you have any comments or suggestions for future videos, please feel free to leave them in the comments section. And also make sure you subscribe to not only my channel, but also Instagram. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.